Great. Well, thank you for everyone who's tuning into the event, and thank you to our lovely panelists. This is the first event in the social circle. I'm Rachel. I'll be the host for the evening. I've been the one who's been working with Texas Real Food to coordinate this event this evening and for all future online events of this sort, which we're going to be putting on about every month. So I'll talk a little bit more about our next event that we've planned already for next month, or technically March. But yes, very excited to have this as the first one. As for the event tonight, I think everyone who's here probably knows the title, unless you've just happened upon Texas Real Food going live right now. But the title for the first one is How to Plan Your Garden in 2022 with specific focus on Texas. Basically, we'll just be helping all y'all to create the garden of your dreams, hopefully. And we'll be talking with the panelists for about an hour, and then we will have time for questions at the end. And there is a live chat, and that's how you'll be able to submit the questions. And I have my one of my colleagues managing that board, so he can pull out, things that he thinks are relevant, and he'll pass them on to me. So without further ado, we'll start with Sarah and Sylvain. Sarah and Sylvain have created a no-till biointensive permaculture project called the Talking Tree Farm that consists of 8 small regenerative agricultural businesses that work together in the San Antonio area. So feel free to take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah.
I'm Silva.
And it's true that we started a permaculture project about 5 years ago in Converse, Texas, just a little bit outside of San Antonio. And that was just the two of us living in a camper and borrowing a friend's land to start this project and farm. Our goal was to feed ourselves and create a sustainable project, and then bring produce to market for the community around us. Fast forward 5 years, and we are now a cooperative made up of 3 farmers. So we have 2 other market gardeners with us, Stephanie and Brandon, and then we have 6 other regenerative driven agricultural businesses. We have somebody doing compost, we have a medicinal garden, we have egg production, we have honey production, we have mushrooms, we have worms, we have, again, vegetables and some fruits. So, and we've been doing classes the past year for adults. This year we've started with homeschool cooperatives coming during the week, and we have a farm stand that's open twice a week. And we really focus on community. I mean, within ourselves, we are a community. And then now we've really been opening that to everybody else joining our community, families coming, shopping for produce. We have farm memberships that give them access to events, seasonal events, and to go into the market garden with the farmers, with your family and your children, to go harvest your vegetables. So bringing everybody one step closer to where their food comes from. We don't know, I mean, if you know anybody else, please put us in touch. We don't know anybody else that's doing this. So we're figuring it out as we go, kind of, but it came from this idea of us trying to do all the different pieces of permaculture and getting exhausted and burned out. And we had compost queens come on our property and use our space for their compost facility. Mm-hmm. And we loved this partnership. We loved seeing them there every morning. He's not going to work. When I started having children, I didn't go very often to the farm, but for him to go and see somebody and say hi and have a coffee with, and then he didn't have to do the compost anymore. So it like lifted up that duty. And so we really loved that concept, and we started bringing on more of those businesses with like-minded goals. So it's been really, really great year. Everyone's having a blast. And that's what we do. Our mission is hopefully other small scale farmers join forces on one land and create cooperatives like ours. with the goal of reversing climate change, building topsoil, food security, community. We share expenses. We share a POS system at farmers market and farm stand. We support each other. We collaborate together with new products and ideas. And yeah, it just opens doors for other opportunities as well. Like for us, volunteer days we have every Wednesday and Sunday. So people come and everyone has help because we're all on site together. And it maybe even other avenues of income as well with classes and maybe potentially farm dinners. So it's really great. And that's us. That's what we're doing. We're really busy. We have 2 kids. We're hiding in the greenhouse. So they don't bother us. We have some babysitters. So we're just taking it day by day and loving what we do. And we want to make a difference and we want to make a positive impact.
I've just been sharing some of the photos you sent over too. I don't know if you can see that, but just scrolling through. I don't know if you wanted to explain any of them as I'm doing that, but.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, that photo is of a class with a co-op. Most of our co-ops range from like ages 5 to 12, but we really just do that. Those look like some older kids, but that's a composting class. So we're teaching them how to use a broad fork. We are a no-till farm, teaching them, you know, circular systems, circular gardens, starting with feeding your soil. And we don't use anything else other than compost. So we broad fork, we apply compost, and we're teaching the kids how to do that right now. And we're using compost queens. So that's a great thing about the cooperative as well, is everyone's a professional in their field. And so we have compost queens there teaching the kids. That's a volunteer day. So we have volunteers coming to help our mushroom cultivators, South Texas Seasonals, build mushroom bags. And it's just so much fun. We play music and we have a great time. That's an adult class. We don't have a classroom yet. We set up some tents, but that's we call morning at Talking Tree, where every instructor has an hour to teach. And we spend the day. We have a chef who's also a partner of ours come and cook kind of like a farm to table meal.
Lunch?
Yeah, lunch. Cook lunch in between the classes. So that's their adult classes there that you see. That's one of our homeschooler groups, and that's a market gardener, Brandon. So I wanted to definitely feature all of our co-ops because we're not doing this alone. That's Compost Queens in their area at our farm. Another market gardener, Stephanie. That's Alan for egg and honey production. So they definitely deserve the praise, and they're amazing. And everyone, this is a team effort. Efficient Earthlings, she focuses on vermicomposting and worms, but she's really getting more involved with other beneficial insects for the garden. There's a cut flower farmer, Cecile, with swirling seeds. South Texas Seasonals, our mushroom cultivator, Andrew.
Sorry.
Standing next to a beautiful moringa tree in the medicinal garden.
Oh, there we go.
That's our partner chef, Gastronomy Live Events. It's Chef Josh. And our herbalist, Lynn from Trava, Herbs for Wellness.
Cool. Okay, that was it of your.
And yeah, you can visit our website, talkingtreefarm.com, and then of course our social media to see more or learn more.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks guys. We're excited to be here. We're honored. Thank you for reaching out to us and having us do this. We're excited to teach.
I'm excited as well. Okay, so we'll just move right on to Karina next, who is the owner of Lettuce Live. It's a wellness movement that's focused on inspiring families and empowering communities. Karina works with teachers and community leaders, corporations, and also just aspiring gardeners to teach them how to grow the food they love to eat. So if you want to take it from here, Karina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It is an exciting time to talk about real food. I am really passionate about exposing people and getting people to grow the foods that they love to eat. I believe if you're going to take control of your health, you have to start growing your own food. And I believe that if you're going to change your community, then also you all need to be growing food together. You can find me on Facebook at Let Us Live, and you can find me on Instagram at Let Us Live Urban Farm. Also, in my effort to inspire more people to grow their food, I host a Live from the Garden series where we tour gardens all around the world with the hopes of inspiring people to grow their own foods. And what we do is just talk to different gardeners and farmers and show their backyard gardens or their farms to everyone around the world. We've been as far as Denmark, we've gone to Canada, we've gone right here in Texas, but our hope is that you can see that there's no excuse for you not to be growing something edible. You can grow it on on small areas, backyards, patios, and we've even toured a garden that was all on cement. Everything that they grew was in pots and grow bags. So I hope by the end of this conference, you start growing something edible.
Wow, what? On cement? I guess in pots? That's so cool. I love
Grow
that.
bags.
In grow bags. Cool. Well, thank you, Karina. Yeah, I'm excited to learn more from you, especially all the stuff that you, help people do in terms of putting food into your own hands. Love that. Okay, so then we have Rachel from Plant It Forward. Their organization empowers refugees to develop sustainable farms in the Houston area. You work with a lot of farms, 8 farms, or farmers across 4 farm sites in the Houston area. And this is Rachel, the farm programs director. And so, yeah, Rachel, if you want to present your organization.
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm really happy to be here with these other great growers. So Plant It Forward was founded in 2011, and like Rachel said, our mission is to empower refugees to develop sustainable farms. We work with a network of 13 farmers, and they operate 8 farms. So some of them are partnered up, and we have 6 acres total across 4 sites in Houston. And on it, our farms are feeding about 1,000 families every week, between farmers markets, our farm share program, and sales through our food hub. So those are really the key things to know about Plant It Forward. You can find out a lot more information at plantitforward.farm. I guess I'll just say that the farmers we work with, again, they're new Americans. They arrived with refugee status from Congo and Liberia. And today they are leaders in Houston's local food system. They're rejuvenating this food system. And this is a picture of one of our farmers, Constant, at a work day with students. So we also, actually this is a work day with adults, but we also teach classes to students and engage the community in this work. And we know that people are really hungry for it, hungry to reconnect with growing. So I'm excited to talk to you guys a little bit about that today.
I just had a photo of your garden too. I'll just put on the screen real quick. Yes. Or is this one of the sites, or
This
it's
is one of our
large?
one of our farm sites. Yeah, there's 6 acres total. So this is a 2-acre site. You're seeing about half of it. It's actually the same one I put in my virtual.
Oh yeah, it's in your background.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, thanks so much for the introductions. And yeah, we have their websites posted in the event page, and we'll send some information out to everybody at the end as well, in maybe a more condensed form, just with any links and material that we go over. But great, so I wanted to start off with the more simple question before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of gardening. But what would you say are just your main or your favorite benefits of gardening and growing food for yourself and your family? So I guess, Rachel, do you want to start off with this one?
Sure. So I got into agriculture because I wanted to do something to address our ecological and sustainability crisis. But I've stayed in agriculture because it's super enjoyable. You engage your mind, you engage your body. It's just good work. You know, it's work that's in our ancestry very deeply. And doing that work feels really good. So it doesn't need to be more complicated than that.
Cool. Karina, do you want to answer? I can ask again, just what are your favorite benefits of gardening or growing food or anything in that realm?
For me, it's really growing community. I'm community based at the core of who I am. I enjoy building community. And so garden allows me to build relationships with people all across the world. It allows me to build relationships with people I probably would never come across their paths, but because we're growing together or they're interested in growing or growing food, then it gives me an opportunity to engage with them. But I think at the core of what I enjoy is that I feel like I'm doing God's work in investing in the soil, investing in our community, investing in food. And I honestly can take control of my health. I can eat the food that I grow. I don't have to hand my well-being over to someone else or to the grocery store. And then I can provide food for my family and my community. So I love that. I also enjoyed doing garden therapy. So I do a lot of horticulture therapy with people in rehab. And I think if I had to sum up, if everything that I really, really love to do, and if someone took away everything and I could only do one thing, it would be garden therapy. It fills me, it fills my heart. I love doing it. I get more than I give to the people in recovery.
Wow, that's really cool. I didn't realize you did garden therapy, but I feel like it makes sense why you enjoy that so much. Okay, and then yeah, talking tree.
It is getting dark and we are in our greenhouse, so I might have to find a new hiding spot for my children, but we would love to answer this. I think permaculture, it's why we are a permaculture project, because everything that Stephanie and Karina said, we also agree with. And permaculture is people care, fair share, earth care. In the beginning for us, I found my husband in Thailand and he was farming for a community. I found you across on the other side of the world. And I didn't know anything about growing food. I really didn't. So he introduced me to all of that. He doesn't want to speak as much as me because he has a strong French accent, but he is all knowledge. So when I lose my step, I'll look at him and he'll take over. But the initial reason I wanted to pursue this as a career, I guess you could say, is food security. But when we learned of GMO, I didn't want like a dependency on any major corporation for my survival. That instilled a lot of fear in me. So that is the reason why I started it. But as years passed, I totally forgot about that. And it really was the enjoyment, the pleasure, the connection with Mother Earth, everything, even on a spiritual level. And now I think it's that still, but food is very expensive. Like good, nutritious food is extremely expensive. So now there's this need to grow your own food if you want a nutritious diet for your family. So that is also at play now. In order for us to bring that to the table, we have to grow it, at least for my family. So that's where we're coming from and why we do it and why we grow.
Thank you everyone for those. I wanted to kind of, start with like kind of an intention setting in a way, to get everyone who's watching to think about the intention of why they want to garden. And I think that you all have very lovely answers. So yeah, I encourage everyone else to, tap into their own reasons as well. Cool. Moving to the more tangible stuff. Okay, so I want to just jump right into setting up your garden. And the first part of that is finding a spot, either in your backyard or on a slab of cement, like Karina was saying, or in pots. Also, how do you deal with sun? Obviously, those are a lot of questions, but all at once. But just, yeah, setting up your garden, choosing the spot, paying attention to sun as well. I guess, Karina, did you want to start talking about this one?
So for me, I think it's convenience. Out of sight, out of mind. If you're doing a garden in your backyard or on the side of your house, wherever, if it's out of sight or it's difficult to get to it, then I think you will find every excuse in the world not to do it, right? So then you ask the question of where's the sunny area? Vegetable gardens need 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. And oftentimes new gardeners may think, oh, that's too much sunlight. That it's really sunny over there. But that's what vegetables need. They need 6 to 8 hours of sunlight or they're going to struggle. So first, find the location that is convenient and that you typically, like if you're going to do it in your backyard, I say, look out in your backyard. And then where's an area that the family either can look out and see out your window or where there's some traffic? Because if you go outside and it's around the corner, then when it's cold or when it's hot or when it's dark and you want to harvest something to eat, you're less likely to go around the corner, slush through some mud, go through some bushes and things like that. So it's really convenient. And then the 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. And then if you find an area that has a 6 to 8 hour sunlight, you want to look at the future. So the future is if your neighbor has a small tree and that tree is subject to be 15, 20 feet tall, then you can put your garden there. But maybe next year is going to be all shade because your neighbor's tree is going to cover it, or you have a new tree that you're kind of putting close to that area. So I think that you have to look at those things first, convenience, and then secondly, 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. And then third, you don't want to go anywhere there's going to be a lot of trees.
The tree point is such a good one. That, yeah, is good to keep in mind because trees grow and some of them grow very quickly.
Yes, and that's one of the things that's often overlooked. And then lastly, most importantly, is access to water. I forgot about that. So if you don't have a water hose or a water spout close by, it may be a little bit difficult. If you're a new gardener, again, all these obstacles that you have, if you have to go get a water jug, lug it to the garden. If you're a new gardener, the obstacles tend to make you not want to do it. So I think first, when you're first starting out, it's about convenience, convenience, convenience. And if you're in Texas and most places, you need water. It gets brutally hot in Houston, and we need to water in most cases every day.
Yeah, that's a good point about making it easy for yourself as well as a new gardener. Okay, so I think, did Sarah and Sylvain step away for a second? I guess they're finding more sun. So Rachel, is there anything you want to add to what Karina said?
I think she covered the basics. You can see in this photo behind me, full sun, no trees. That's what you want for vegetables. You can get away with some things in the shade, but it's not an ideal situation. So I think she covered it.
What about herbs too? I feel like Karina was saying 6 to 8 hours for vegetables. Do you need as much light for just an herb garden?
Ideally, I find that you can get away with herbs in shady areas, especially in the summer. Sometimes in the summertime, we'll create shade. So having your herb garden in the shade in the summer can be fine. it's certainly ideal to have direct sun.
Mhm. Oh, I see. Okay, so
I
then,
do want to comment on that really quick.
yeah.
If because I want everybody to grow and I don't want anybody to have excuses for not growing, right? So if you do have an area that is not going to have 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, and then maybe you're on the 4 to 5 hours or 3 hours, then there's certain plants, and we're again, because we're talking about food, I'm only going to talk about vegetable and herbs, but there are like in the summertime, excuse me, in the wintertime, lettuce is one of the things that doesn't need a whole lot of direct sunlight. And there are a number of things that don't necessarily in the summertime have to have a lot of direct sunlight. Lavender, it likes a little bit of shade. It doesn't like the Texas sun. So I think you figure out how many hours of sunlight you have and then grow something that likes either shade or sun. If you have shade, then in the wintertime, like I said, you can get away with more things that are okay with shade than in the summertime. Peppers and tomatoes, they need a lot of direct sunlight. So I would encourage anybody that is in a position where you don't have 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, think about growing something that doesn't need as much sun, because there is something you can grow that doesn't require or that will still grow and thrive with less than 6 hours of sunlight.
Okay. And then, yeah, Sarah and Sylvain, did you have something to add?
I think everybody covered it. I would say the only thing I tell my students when they come, the younger kids, is I give them a homework assignment and I say, okay, in the morning you wake up, you go in your backyard, if you're planning on putting your garden in the backyard, and you look at where the sunniest spot is. And then a couple hours later, go back and maybe mark it with some sticks or some rocks, and then go back a couple hours later and see if that's still the sunniest spot. Maybe it's changed. It might take a couple of days, but keep going back into your space and observe to find the best. And of course, everything that y'all mentioned are things to consider.
Okay, I think we covered sun pretty well. Next, I want to go on to mainly soil health, but also, fertilizers, compost. I know some people might not live in an area that has the best ground soil, or they might be concerned about the soil in the ground. So maybe you have suggestions on having a raised bed or not, and then what to fill that raised bed with, or how to deal with the issue of soil. And then, yeah, feel free to talk about compost and fertilizer and any of that. So I guess we'll start. Who wants to start with Rachel? Do you want to start this one off?
Sure. So in Houston, I'll say that raised beds are a necessity. We have heavy clay soils that hold a lot of water, and it rains a ton here, 50 inches a year. So you need to have a raised bed. We have raised beds on all the farms. On the farms, when we talk about raised bed, we're not necessarily putting down cardboard, boarding it, filling it with soil, but we are digging up the soil that's around there. We're plowing it, throwing it onto a raised bed. In your garden, you're gonna probably put down cardboard or something else, so some layer of plastic, and build with cement blocks or wood a raised bed. And we're talking, I'm trying to look at your other questions.
Soil, where to get soil, best soils to use, compost. Yeah.
So on our farms, we can't afford to purchase in all of our soil. And so we use a slower approach. So we use a lot of mulching materials. We'll get wood chips, we'll get leaves from landscapers in the area. We'll heavily mulch. I'm talking 12 inches of mulch in between all of our beds, and let that decompose and then throw it up onto the bed. Once it's decomposed, and that is an effective organic material. What you're looking for anytime you're building soil is to build up the organic matter. And compost is going to do that. Any mulching materials are going to do that. More organic matter is better, but you have to balance that with what you can afford, which is why, again, on the farms, we're going to be looking for those free to inexpensive sources of mulch. We do bring in compost, and in a home garden, you probably have access to like compost from a company that's going to make it, that's going to have a really nice balanced compost, and that's certainly recommended. But again, if you can't afford that, there's lots of methods to make backyard compost. Anyone can do it with your kitchen scraps. So I'll hand it off to someone else. Obviously, this is a big topic. It's the heart of growing is the soil.
I appreciate you talking about some, free ways and stuff too. So how about, I guess we'll move on to Sarah and Sylvain next. Someone also asked to maybe add into this question is just using cement blocks for a vegetable garden. So maybe if you're talking about raised beds.
I was referring to building a frame with cement blocks, and people do that all the time. It's safe.
I think the question was, one of the questions on Facebook was, and we haven't talked about it yet, but is it safe to use cement blocks for gardening? And the answer is yes. I think that was a question, but we were talking more about building up the soil.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I wanted to add up something to what Rachel said. On our farm, compost is great, but compost is, Rachel said, there's a price to it, and when you farm a couple of acres, it's become very expensive. And we use the same way. She said we're adding a lot of wood chips, a lot of organic materials. You have to keep in mind that when you put compost in your bed, you feed the plants. You don't really feed the soil because it's already a finished product that's been decomposed from organic matter. So there's not much food for bacteria and microorganisms into the soil. It's food straight for your plants. While you're adding wood chips and then leaves and then other fresh organic matters, that's going to feed all that life in the soil, that's slowly going to decompose it and create compost that going to slowly feed the plants. So in my opinion, it's much more sustainable to keep adding wood chips and leaves that are much cheaper material that you can usually get for free from tree trimming company. They're usually very happy to dump it for free on your farm. And it's a longer term, but in the long term, you save a lot of money, and then it makes your soil better and better. And we are on clay as well, and we can grow 16-inch carrots without any trouble.
What would you say about buying pre-mixed soils as well? Either Sylvain and Sarah or Karina can start as well if she, yeah.
So when you buy topsoil, I will really be careful where it's coming from, because it can potentially and most likely gonna bring you a lot of weeds. So there's weeds that you can slowly get rid of, but there's also other weeds like Bermuda grass that are really hard to get rid of. So I wouldn't bring topsoil. You're better off with compost, because usually compost is cooked at a certain temperature. So any potential seeds will be cooked in the process of the compost too. So if you don't know where the topsoil is coming from, I will avoid it.
You would avoid it.
Yeah, because we farmed before for 3 years on the land with Bermuda grass, and it's very discouraging. It's very hardworking, a lot of weeding and.
Mm-hmm. I guess also with compost, you don't really need fertilizer, so that's another benefit to just using compost, right? Okay, anything else to add? Karina, did you want to take over? Did you have anything else to add, Sarah?
I agree with Sylvain that compost is the best, and you really do need to be aware of where you're getting your soil from. or your topsoil, even your compost. You really need, just because it says compost doesn't mean that it's great. So be aware of the source, and the darker the soil, the richer it is with living matter. So if you're not really familiar with compost, if you get something that's kind of gray or grayish, then it's void of live matter. So you want to get a darker, richer soil and our compost. So I agree that the key is knowing where your source is, because you really don't want to bring in a whole lot of grass, because that could make a nightmare of trying. It takes several years to get rid of grass seeds if it's brought in your soil.
The other question kind of in this realm is going back to raised beds. Somebody, let's see, Marlene and then Angel in the chat were asking about putting down plastic for raised beds. Any advice, or anyone want to jump in?
To clarify, I was referring to a landscape fabric. So some people like to put that down as a barrier. Not strictly necessary if you're going to be filling it with compost or even a soil mixture. But some people like to do that as an extra weed barrier.
I just want to chime in and say that we also use the woven landscape fabric that's UV treated, and it lasts like 10 to 20 years, and it keeps everything really nice and tidy for you. So it's very efficient.
Yeah, it's helped to prevent weeds to crawl back slowly to your garden.
Water can penetrate it. The worms and life under keep soil structure. Yeah. And then everything's happy. I mean, it's great. We recommend it as well.
Okay. And then anyone have a recommendation for compost, where to buy good compost in? They asked about the Houston area, but feel free to shout out a name of anywhere that that y'all are located.
There's Gonzales, I believe it's probably between here and San Antonio. You can get mushroom compost from kitchen pride mushroom. It's very cheap, and it's good. It's good compost. You just need to let it sit for 2-3 months to let it cool off. But it's made out of mushroom spawn and then straw and chicken manure, basically. That's what they use for facility, and it's really cheap.
Yeah, and if you're in our area,
yeah, you're using it.
Yeah, we get mushroom compost.
Yeah, we don't using it because we produce enough on the site,
and we have compost queens
with our partners. But yeah, it's a cheap way to get truckloads.
In Houston, there's farm dirt, there's living earth, and there's the ground up. All have compost and good soil mixes.
I would say Nature's Way as well. It's a little bit outside of Houston, but for me, in the last probably 6 to 8 years, that is my go-to when I want top quality. If I want to spend the money, not have weeds and have a good production, I'm going with Nature's Way. They're not paying me, but that is my preference. And then also for new gardeners, I think with everything, foundation is key. So if you can get a good compost, then you're not going to have a lot of frustrations. You're really going to avoid some of the obstacles of your plants not growing right, or pest and disease and things like that. So I would encourage you, and I always say this when I'm teaching, is if you have $10, spend $8 on compost and spend the other $2 on a seed and a plant. But compost is really, really, really where you want to spend your money.
Cool. Okay, we're gonna move on to the plants and choosing the plants. And Karina, you just ended off on soil here. I'm just gonna have you go straight into talking about the hardiness zone map. You actually have some guides on your website, and I have some of the guides that you have on your website pulled up. But if you wanted to pull up a map as well, feel free. But yeah, the hardiness zone map is just I'll let you take it away, but it's just a good place to start in terms of understanding what you can grow.
Okay, I will pull it up on my screen. Give me just a minute. Let's see here. Just a moment. Okay, it's actually going to be, let's see. Could you all see that map? I'm not sure if it came up or not. Let me try it again. I'm not sure if I have.
Yeah, we could see it.
Okay, let me try it again. Can you see it fully now?
Yes. Yeah.
And then can you see the numbers on the side? I'm not sure if
They're
how
kind
about
of hard to see, but you can see all the colors, of course, that correspond to numbers. So
let me
that's a
see.
start.
Let me see if I can move this over. And let me go in one more. What about, is that a little bit, you still kind of hard to see?
Yeah, I mean, since we're kind of zooming in on Texas, you can kind of just maybe say what the numbers are if you can see them well on your end.
Yeah, let me, since we're zooming in on Texas, let's do this.
Yeah, perfect.
There we go. Okay, so Texas is, excuse me, where I'm located, which is the Let Us Live Community Farm is in Missouri City, Texas. And so that's kind of Sugarland, Houston, borderline Sugarland, Houston, Stafford, in that area. And we are a 9A. And when you look at this map, if you could see over to the right, 9A says 20 to 25 degrees. And what it is, it's a geographical area defined to encompass a certain range of climatic conditions relative to plant growth and survival. And so when you look at a plant hardiness, if you're growing something in the wintertime, you're going to, as a 9A, you want a plant to be able to withstand 20 to 25 degree is really what it's telling you. You want something that's going to be able to live within that temperature. And then it's really for farmers and gardeners and growers. We really go by that when we're trying to plant something, and it helps us really to determine if something is going to survive. And they're most likely to thrive if you get something that's hardy, like if you're a 7B, it's 5 to 10 degrees. And so if you get something that can survive those temperatures, then if you get a plant that says that it's going to survive those temperatures, then more than likely it will be able to do that. And then before I move forward to the next topic, I want to just make sure, are there any questions regarding the hardiness map? And the map is really based on the average minimal winter temperatures. So that is at the minimum, at the lowest temperature is going to be 20 degrees. Anything after that, if you have a plant, if your plant says its hardiness is 20 to 25 degrees, or a 9 is meant to be in 9A or B, if anything drops below the 20 to 25 range, and it may be difficult for your plant to survive that.
Yeah, no real questions yet, I think, have come in. Just kind of a basic thing too is you can just look up, this exact map, find out what zone you're in, and then, as Karina was saying, certain plants, if you're buying seeds, maybe it'll even be on the seed packet. Or just knowing what zone you live in will help you a lot. Someone asked, they said they're right on the border of 8B and 9A. Is there like a good default? Does it matter which one they choose?
If your border of 8B and not, did you say 8B and 9A? Mm-hmm. I would go with the higher of the temperature, because at least if your plant is really meant to be no longer than 20 degrees and you get something that, if you get something that can't tolerate 15 degrees, at least you erred on the side of caution of it surviving the 20 degrees.
Okay. So yeah, the hardiness zone map is more about the coldest temperature rather than the hottest, but there's also like a sunlight map. We don't have to go over that fully, but I don't know if you use that as well when you're determining.
Yeah, so there's a heat map as well. And the USDA is the one that developed this plant hardiness map. And as you mentioned, if you can get the plant hardiness map and the heat map on our website at letuslive.org, you can get that and it'll send it back directly to you if you're interested in that. But then with climate change, the reality of it is a lot of temperatures are changing. And I know for us, we're having to look at that heat map because it's hotter than usual. Last year, it was brutally hot and unusually hot here. And so many of our plants didn't survive. And I think probably everyone, I know Planet Forward definitely can attest to the pests that we started having because we've had extremely warm weathers during the wintertime.
Right. I think, the hardiness zone map is a good thing to look at. There are lots of websites too where you can put in your zip code and know for sure. You also, I just wanted to maybe move to, there's some Texas A&M charts that you had on your website as well that just kind of go through a bunch of plants and when's the best time to start them. So I'm sure there's a lot more questions about the heat versus, how well a plant can survive. But I think if we can just move on to.
Can I show the heat hardiness map as well? Because this one is, okay, let me show that.
Sure, yeah, you can show that real quick.
Let me show the heat hardiness map. For some reason it keeps showing, just a moment, keep showing this other one. All right, there we go. All right, there we go. And this can be found, we can send it to you through our website, or you can go to American Horticulture Society and they have this heat map as well. And that the heat map is really the same as it, you want to know about what is the hottest temperature your plants will be able to survive. I'll zoom in so that you can see more of Texas and see the numbers there. And the map is helpful to growers because it's a rough guide that gives us any extreme minimum temperature that our plants can tolerate. And so along with the map that you want to talk about for the farmers, Texas A&M and the master gardeners, if all you have to do is Google plant guide and then put your city or zip code, but that's relative to everyone, but new gardeners especially. So you know what to grow. If you're trying to grow cucumbers right now and you're in Houston, or you're trying to grow okra right now and you're in Houston, it's not going to happen. So you really want to make sure you're growing the right plants in the right season. And then to cut down on your frustration, you also want to make sure that you are growing a plant that's going to survive in the area. So for like example, we had a peach tree that we had for probably 6 or 7 years. It never produced any fruit, and I didn't want to cut it down because the tree was nice and big and green. And I was like, okay, it will produce. I didn't plant the tree, so I didn't know what variety it was. but the variety was a type that needed over 100+ freeze hours. So that didn't happen until last year. Last year we had over 100 freeze hours, and so guess what happened? We got peaches last year, but we're praying that that never happens again. So that tree is not ideal for our growing area. You'll get yourself frustrated trying to grow something that is not going to produce or do what you think it's going to do in your area if you're not aware of the hardiness, what's ideal for the area that you're growing in. So those are some of the things that will cut down on the frustration and help you be a successful gardener or a successful grower.
Okay, thank you for showing those maps. I think it's important, yeah, just to know what zone you live in. I'm just going to share this other screen real quick, and then maybe Sarah and Rachel can jump in talking about that topic and this map that I'm about to show, which is on the same topic as well. But if you wanted to get started talking, Sarah, while I pull this up.
Sure. Okay, I was gonna maybe touch that question because we are also in 8B, 9A.
9A, yeah.
Yeah,
Border.
and we're on the border. And I would say just grow both. I think diversity is really important in the garden. So like, Karina was saying, weather may be differently this year than next, and you'll always have something, right? So I would say, I think it's a blessing to be on the border, and you should grow both. That way you can always have something. Diversity is super important. But yeah, anything else?
Yeah, after there's some trees, that won't handle as much heat that can be grown under another tree that will partially shade them, or more in the north side. There's, where, especially when you're on the border, you can like play with microclimates, and then play a little bit with walls and plant a lemon on the south side, protect from the wall, that will help, or from a fence.
And we're really lucky to be in Texas because, for Silva, he always says this. He's like, wow, in Texas, you can grow year round because in the winter you can grow in a greenhouse, and in the summer you can grow under a shade cloth. So it's pretty amazing. And like he's saying, you can play with those microclimates using, greenhouse and shade cloth or walls or trees. And my herbalist, she's already told me, I told her about a peach tree that I also have in my backyard. And she was like, oh, peach tree leaves, they're great for tea. So she would tell you to harvest those and make a tea.
Good to know. Thanks for that. I just pulled up this, can everyone see? Yeah, it looks like it's pulled up. This is just an example of a guide to when to plant certain plants at what time in the year. And this one's based out of Rosenberg, which is where Texas A&M is. So obviously this isn't where everybody lives, but I just wanted to pull up this example. Other examples like this exist, but if Rachel or Sarah wanted to talk a little bit about a chart like this, they're pretty self-explanatory, but just for a few minutes, since we still have some stuff to cover.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna say, do you want us to talk through how to read it, or just my general advice is, if you're starting out, obviously there's a lot of information. There's 30 plants listed here, 30 different crops. They all have their own growing conditions. There's infinite variety. Within cucumbers, you can grow the long suyu type cucumbers. Those grow great in Houston in the summertime. You can grow like itty bitty pickling cucumbers. So there's a lot of choice and information, and it's going to be helpful if you're starting to really just plant squarely within the seasons. When you are comfortable, you can start to experiment with adding shade or frost protection in the winter. But if you're getting started, go with the green on here. Like, just plant in its proper season, and get yourself comfortable. That's also going to help you as much as possible, avoid pest problems. When you are in season, the farther you extend, the more work you're going to have to do to keep that plant happy in terms of temperature, in terms of its pests. So stick to the green and find a list in your area of recommended varieties. Master gardeners will have these in Houston. Bob Randall has a great book with lots of great variety recommendations. So get some like tried and true varieties for your area and start there, and start with, a few of your favorite things, because that's where you're going to have the most enjoyment. And maybe you won't be fully successful the first time, but every head of cauliflower that you get, you'll love. So don't get overwhelmed.
Yes, very, very agree. Don't failure. You bring success from failure. I just wanted to add from the planting date that you see. Keep in mind, for example, for tomatoes, the green, it's tell you that it's ideal planting time, which means it's need to go in the ground. So if you're starting, it's not mean the time you will start from the seeds. If you start your tomato seeds in March, they're gonna start producing June. It's already very hot by June. You potentially won't get anything from them, so you need to keep in mind to put the seeds before that ideal planting time. And for tomatoes, it's take around a month to a month and a half from seeds to go to the ground, and more for peppers, even more for eggplants. And so ideal planting time and seedling time are different.
And so you're saying like a chart like this, the ideal planting time would be when you're planting a start rather than from a seed?
Yes, for example, for us as a farmer, when we grow tomatoes, I'm starting my tomatoes the first week of January or the last week of December. So they will go in a small pot, and then from that pot, 2-3 weeks later, when they pull the true leaves, they go to a bigger pot for another 3 weeks to a month, and then they will go to the ground between mid-February to mid-March, So we always put some before, hoping that we won't have any freeze. They always gamble a little bit there. But yes, if you start to seed in March, they go in the ground in late May and June, and it's already, we eat 90 easy, and plants doesn't grow much after it's getting too hot.
Mm-hmm.
So you won't get much of an harvest.
Also, to their point on that chart, if you look at that chart again, it tells you if a particular plant needs to be planted by bulb or by plant. If it doesn't have plants in the parentheses, then it's safe to assume that they're talking about the seed. But when you look at that chart, it does, if you pull up that chart again, it does tell you in parentheses bulbs or plants, and it's talking about starter plants. If it doesn't say bulbs or plants, it's suggesting that you plant them directly by seeds. There's some things that you should not plant, like carrots. Carrots are not good to transplant. I don't even know if you can transplant a carrot, but there's certain things that you have to plant by seed if you want to be successful. So on this, if you look at, let's see, beans, let's see, beets. It doesn't say plant. So beets need to be sown directly by seed. Broccoli, if you want to be successful, then 9 times out of 10, you really need to plant the plant. Cauliflower, you need to plant the plant. Carrots, as I mentioned, is something that you need to start by seed. Onions, you're typically going to plant onion bulbs, or you can do also onion transplant. So just look at that list, and if it doesn't have plant or bulbs or transplant, then it's safe to assume that you're going to go ahead and plant it by seed. And that also is on our website. And if people have questions about how to find that, you can Google plant guide and your area, or you can send us a message and we'll try to help you find it.
Great. Yeah, I think also on the chart, there's multiple planting seasons too. So yeah, just as what Karina said, like, I think you can Google them pretty easily. I think someone said earlier too, Master Gardeners usually has those lists. Okay, so the next question I have is just kind of the best beginner plants. I think we touched on this a little, right? Of just like grow the foods that you like. But if anyone has any particular plants that they think are good beginner plants, you could just throw them out there. Yeah.
Well, I would say outside of the typical vegetable garden where you're growing what you like to eat, in our area and around San Antonio, we have had, I just want to share our success. We have had great success with growing perennials, artichokes, asparagus, the moringa tree, our fruit trees, fig, persimmon, and pomegranate. So a lot of those fruits are extremely expensive in the grocery store, and they do very, very well here. So we really recommend that you grow those types of fruit trees and those plants.
If we're thinking about, the upcoming spring into summer garden, I'd say sweet potatoes are an easy place to start. Very satisfying. They're good for your soil. They're gonna open it up if you have a hard soil like we do here in Houston. Okra, beloved. Southern peas, good choice. Yard long beans. Some of those are pretty simple. If you're a beginner, I think we'd all warn you against diving right into tomatoes and squash. At least in Houston, squash attract a lot of pests. They might frustrate you. So maybe hold off on those ones till you have your feet wet.
I'd agree with definitely staying away from squash. We have those squash vine borers and you will frustrate yourself. I think if we're talking about today, I think there's in most places in Texas, you have enough time to go ahead and start your fall garden. You can grow lettuce in 4 to 6 weeks, so you can drop seeds for that. You still have time to grow carrots right now. You have time to grow beets. You have time to grow kale, spinach. So there's still enough time. If you've kind of put off starting your fall garden, I would encourage you to go ahead and start, because there's still plenty of time to grow a lot of peas and things like that, where we're going to have this cooler weather for a while. So I would encourage you to start with some winter garden, and then the spring is also a very lovely time to start gardening.
Yes, we're coming in at a good time. You were just mentioning tomatoes and pests. So I think maybe we can move on now to just some common problems that you might deal with in terms of taking care of this new garden that you've just planted. And now, you have these bugs eating your tomatoes, or, your plant's dying and you don't know why. So just any good maybe natural pesticides to use, and then good things to look out for plant care. We could start with Sarah and Sylvain for this one.
So for us at the farm, we don't use any pesticide at all, because we believe that nature is perfect and we try to work with it and not against it. So we try to create ecosystem that will attract predators, so that will help control the pest. And I also believe that if you're not willing to have loss in your garden, gardening might not be for you. It might be very disappointing, because you can, pest, heat, cold. There are so many reasons you can lose a crop: squirrels, rats, rabbits. There are so many things out there that want to eat your nice produce, So we believe we're okay to lose little thing, but after the years, we have so much predators that balance the pest that, and we grow lure as well. So plant that attract pests so that they stay to those plants and not to the one we eat. And that's helped a lot. So little trick here and there, But yes, stay away from squash. can be tough.
And don't use pesticides or any application, because then you're just kind of putting a Band-Aid on the problem, and you might even be harming the beneficial insects.
Yeah.
So you're really just not improving the ecosystem. Silva always mentions that it takes a 3 years maybe to get a balanced ecosystem. So the first year you might have this pest come in and hit you really hard, and you may want to spray them because you're so angry, but
you're just pushing the problem away.
The predators are going to come. They're going to be there for the next year. The next year you might have a different type of pest or a different type of problem, and you're still frustrated, but the predator is going to come for that new reason, for that new problem. And then eventually everybody's there. We're all a big one happy family working together, and they will work for you.
And you can buy those predators in mostly any nursery,
to release.
You will be able to find praying mantis and ladybugs and all those good predators that will help in the garden.
Yeah. Leave stack of rocks for the lizards, leave pile of leaves, leave pile of sticks.
The spiders.
Yeah. Create a habitat for them. And yeah, accept loss. I think that's our best advice.
Neem oil, it's
is that a question that was just popping up?
It's same as every organic pesticide, it may get rid of the pests, but you may also disturb predators. So
and you're gonna have the same problem next year.
And it's potentially going to come back next year. So after, are you willing to buy every time, every season that product? Are you willing to spend the time to putting that product every time?
So that is our thought.
Our point.
Also,
Yeah.
what did you say that you grew to attract pests?
You're saying something that lures them in.
Like for example, here we have a lot of problem with the leaf-footed bugs, which come during tomato season, and they like to suck all the good sugar from the tomatoes, and they leave you those spotted, blend tomatoes. So artichoke is a very good one because they love artichoke. So we got our artichoke cover of them, and then sometime we can come with a vacuum or just let it be. And we use more and more milkweed for aphids issue. We realize that aphids really like milkweed, and so they get through there, and then we just leave them there, so we don't mind they take it down. We are not harvesting milkweed. So there's plants that when you see a plant that attract a specific pest, then it's good to plant them on the border of that's a milkweed with aphids. It's good to plant them on the border of your garden. So instead of getting rid of them, you move them to a certain spot, and then they stay there while they leave your plants alone. But again, there's always loss.
And the more diversity you have, the better, because
diversity itself a lot.
Yeah, usually a pest comes and they'll bother this one thing, but then you have all this other stuff for you to harvest and eat.
Okay, so I know I'm sure there's so much to cover on pests still, but how about we talk about weeds for just a second? Rachel, did you you have anything to?
Sure. So your best defense is going to be to get them while they're young. If you're doing, the nice compost layer, that's going to do a lot to suppress the weeds, and then just watch. And when there's little weeds, pluck them out. It's going to be your best friend. And that's the the 30-second version of weed maintenance.
Yeah, I just wanted to cover water too. Maybe Karina, if you wanted to start talking about, first of all, somebody asked a while ago about watering your plants with hose water, hard water from the hose. Maybe you could just answer that, and then also talk about how to tell if you're overwatering your plants or underwatering your plants.
So as it relates to water from the hose, most of us are probably going to have to water from the hose. And if you are watering from your hose, I say, remember this: plants are like cats. They do not like to be wet. Oftentimes we water, when you're watering the leaves. Well, the plants don't absorb water through the leaves, they absorb water through the roots. So water low and slow. And it's just like if you haven't you hadn't eaten anything or drank anything, and then you just drink really fast, it kind of upsets your stomach. Well, plants are kind of the same way. It's just, it needs to be slow, because then you have all this runoff and the plants aren't really the roots in the plants aren't absorbing the water. So what I typically do is I'll water, and then I'll go to the next bed and I'll water for a few seconds, and then I'll come back to the other bed, and I'll just alternate, because it absorbs slowly, and then you don't have as much runoff. So again, plants do not like their leaves to be wet. Oftentimes you'll find that you start having, especially in the wintertime, you'll start having powdery mildew and other types of fungus, because the water isn't drying off the leaves. So I encourage you again to water low and slow. And then to the question about how do you tell if your plants are getting too much water or not enough water, plants are like people. If you pay attention, they're going to tell you. And so either you'll start having yellowing of leaves, curling of leaves, you'll start having spots, your leaves will start falling off, they'll be limp. So there'll be indications. And then to control moisture, especially here in Houston when it's super, super hot, you always want to keep your soil covered. Again, because I do garden therapy, I always like to relate everything to life and human. So you don't go outside, or you shouldn't go outside without sunblock. So the soil is the same way. You want to cover your skin, you want to cover your soil. If you don't cover your soil, then what you'll find is you're depleting the nutrients, it's drying faster, you're not protecting those beneficial bugs. So always keep your soil covered. I know for new gardeners, we like that soil to be nice and dark and pretty, but you want to pile the leaves on, you want to pile the mulch on to keep the moisture in, and that will prevent you from having to water as often. If your soil is bare, then you are going to have to water more often. And so I would say, if you're wondering if you're watering too much, just always kind of stick your finger in, and probably if the first inch or two is dry, you may give it a light water for newer plants. And everything is different for each plant. Some plants need more watering than others. If you have a new plant where the root system is going to be right at the top of the soil, whereas if you have an older plant that's been there for a while, the roots are a little bit deeper. And so you're going to want to see if the lower part of your soil is wet instead of the top part, because I know sometimes in the summertime, it may be dry on the top, but if you stick a stick or your finger down further, you'll see that it's moist, and then you could find yourself over watering because you see the top dry and the lower part of the soil is not dry.
If I start a garden this year, I'm definitely going to come back and replay what you just said about sticking your finger in the soil and testing the water.
I have one thing to chime in. I challenge you, if you're struggling and I hear a lot of people say I don't have a green thumb. I challenge you to use rainwater, to harvest rainwater and use that in your garden, because I promise you're going to get a green thumb. That's all I have to say.
Totally agree.
Cool. So I think at this point we covered kind of the basics of the main categories. I wanted to end this before we've kind of been answering some questions coming in along the way, but I just wanted to touch on like the idea of thinking like a farmer and how to get into a good mindset with this, adopting lessons from nature as well, and kind of the permaculture mindset, which I think some people might think of permaculture as more advanced gardening, but even just the basics can be, a good way to think like a farmer. And I wanted to start with Sarah and Sylvain. They sent me a little flow charty thing about this. So I'll just pull that up while you start talking.
Sure. I mean, we consider permaculture just like a toolbox. I mean, I I looked at that chart, which you might share, and I felt it, I believed in it. And then I just moved forward from there. It's not something I go back and reference all the time. But it's like I said, people care, fair share, and earth care, which is what Karina and Stephanie both agree with and are doing. But it is based on those 3 ethics. It has 12 principles. So it's observe and interact, catch and store energy, obtain a yield, apply self-regulation and accept feedback, use and value renewable resources and services, produce no waste, design from patterns to details, integrate rather than segregate, use small and slow solutions, use and value diversity, and use edges and value the marginal, and creatively use and respond to change. So that's something I think we've all been talking about this whole time. But it's just something that we always pull from and we always go back to as far as our values when we're in the garden. So that permaculture, I mean, it could be defined as an approach to land management and food production that adopts what is learned through observing a flourishing ecosystem. So we learn from nature and we apply those things when we're trying to grow food for ourselves. I mean, I could go on and on about but I think that is the basics of permaculture. I could go on and talk about what agriculture is currently doing, but I think that if we were to focus with this and basically all the advice that we've given today, mulch, and no-till and all of these practices, if we were to implement that on even a larger scale, not just home gardens and small scale farmers, I think we could really, really change things, reverse climate change, and really have hope for the future. So that's one of our missions, is to really try and show that it can be done. And, farming like this can feed the world. And we have really great hope with installing a cooperative to make that really successful on such a small scale. And yeah.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to throw that in the mix.
Yeah.
But if anyone else has any tips to thinking like a farmer as well, and then Karina's been responding to a few of the questions here in the chat as well, but which is great. But yeah, we'll go over to that unless anybody else has any tips to, thinking like a farmer, getting in that mindset.
Well, I did see just a question just now about what's the benefit from no-till. So I'm gonna pass it on to Silva.
To me, the biggest benefit, it's when you till, you slowly create a slab underneath your topsoil, and then once you get a heavy rain, that water will penetrate fast the first layer of 10-inch that you till, but then as soon as it hit that under slab, the water is coming back up, and that's when it's create erosion that you usually oftenly see on a big farm, big field, after a big rain. No-till also prevent to breaking the soil structure, which you're going to work very hard through the year adding compost and plants. You're going to create soil structure. You're going to bring worms and a whole bunch of mycelium and then microorganisms, and every time you till, you basically kill all that life. So all that energy, that money, and that time you will spend at the beginning of the season, you're going to just break it down at the end and then come back to your first step. So we never till. We are on clay soil. They call it here the black gombo. It's a dark clay, very sticky soil. And we are able to grow 16-inch carrots. We don't till. We just use a broad fork. And then we add compost. And then we have amazing result in pure clay soil. Broad fork, compost, and mulch.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. Some people were asking about, someone said chopped leaves. Is chopped leaves a good mulch? People are just saying like chopped as in kind of like crumbled leaves, right, guys?
It's like everything.
Leaves.
It's like everything else. You want diversity, if for mulch, for example, you don't want to add only cedar mulch. It won't decompose and it's bad for your soil. But if you add diversity, a whole bunch of leaves, grass clipping, then any organic matters will do the very good job.
Okay. How about this chicken question? How do you keep your chickens from digging up your garden? I don't know who has chickens here, so who's the best to answer that? Maybe Rachel, yeah.
We don't have chickens. I've had chickens in the past. You need to physically separate them. If they are near, they will tear up your garden. So keep them away. That's what you do.
Gotcha. Someone else is talking about companion planting. Maybe Karina, did you want to define companion planting? They say, does companion planting come into play with your permaculture plans? Which I guess is kind of towards Sarah and Sylvain, but
I would say it's towards everybody. I mean, we say permaculture, but Stephanie and Karina are doing the exact same things as we are. So
yeah, from the picture behind Rachel, there's companion planting. It's not as mixed as you will be mixed in your home garden. You know, on a farm, you can't spend time to pick your carrots there and then 200 feet behind go pick another carrots. You're gonna spend too much time. So that's why it's
efficient
it's
at a bigger scale
efficient
farm like Stephanie's and
ours. So it's a context, depending on your context.
But what was the question about permaculture?
Companion planting.
Companion planting. Oh yes, diversity. Yes. And at home you'll benefit from mixing it up and companion planting. And at a farm we just don't do one whole field of one thing, but we do have like a whole row of one thing to make it more efficient for harvest.
Yeah, so I agree with Sylvain and Sarah that with the companion planting, I think the question was, what is companion planting? I think that was the question. Companion planting is really about complementing, growing something that complements or will help disease. For example, she pulled out the milkweed, that she plants that milkweed so that the aphids will attack. Can you show that stem that you had with all those little yellow bugs on there are aphids? And so they, yeah, those are bugs. And so you plant that and then the bugs will be attracted to that. And you don't necessarily care about the loss of that plant or that. Milkweed, I don't even think it dies when they're attacked by aphids, really. But yeah, I didn't think so. So that will attract your aphids. And then meanwhile, hopefully it'll leave your collard greens and your mustard greens kind of alone. They like that. And so it's just really make plants that complement, and diversity is really what and then plants that add nitrogen to the soil are plants that, again, will complement and put in the soil, and while one plant is taking out, the other plant is depositing a nutrient that you need. And I think if we talk about companion planting, and since we're talking about soil, is when plants pull out the nutrients it needs for that growing season. Well, if you plant that same plant again, or that same type of plant in the same area the following season without adding new compost or adding some organic material or fertilizer, you may not be as successful because the previous season that plant has extracted all the nutrients it needed to grow. So you want to that's where, again, companion planting and biodiversity really plays a part in growing successfully.
I've always heard, I think, tomatoes, corn, and beans? That's like a typical companion planting combo. Are there other good ones, if that's even the correct one, or especially for beginners? Anyone, maybe Rachel, or anyone want to talk about that one? Yeah.
Yeah, the one you cite, it's a famous Mexican, South American way of planting, companion planting, because you will plant the corn, and the corn will climb, and then you plant the beans that's gonna climb around the corns, and then the squash is gonna crawl over and make a ground cover to protect evaporation and keep the soil wet. So there's a way that you can create. Usually, if you find on internet, you can find a chart for companion planting. What's do well. There's some that goes with everything. Some plants that doesn't like much each other. So it's
And what Sylvain is talking about is called the Three Sisters. That's what it's known as Three Sisters. So if you're trying to Google what kind of that companion, those three things that he just talked about, it's called Three Sisters.
There's endless detail inside of this world, and that's why at the top of the permaculture chart it's observe and interact, right? So you need to get into it, watch nature, and then if to be a farmer, to be a gardener is to then cultivate pieces of that, but in a way that is going to mimic as closely as we can what nature is doing. So in this brief time it's really hard to go through all the rules. It feels to me like we're just listing off this random list of rules, but
and
when
it could
you
be overwhelming too.
when you start to get out there, just take the time that you're gardening to be connected and pay attention and observe, and all of it is gonna, and do some research, but all of it's gonna start to make sense.
And that's where you're going to get the therapy that Karina's talking about. That's where you're going to get the enjoyment and pleasure, is not to spend your time on Google trying to research every little thing and do it like a science. It's to plant diversity and enjoy, and yes, accept loss, but learn and observe. And what you said was amazing, Stephanie.
Okay. There might be some people that need to leave right at 2:30, so we're kind of right there right now. I think there's kind of 2 or 3 or maybe a few more questions that might come in if the people who don't have to leave right away just want to speak on them for a second or two. I do just want to so let's just go into those two. It's talking about sawdust, sawdust and homemade compost, and
you can use it. It's organic. It's coming from wood. You can throw that into the mix.
The next just question was speaking to tips on transplanting seedlings that you've started indoors. I know we were talking a little bit about seeds and starts and kind of that.
You probably want to do a hardening off process. So if you grew them indoors, you want to put them outdoors for a little while and then maybe take them indoors and then try to harden them off for about a week. And then you of course don't want to put them outside at the hottest part of the day. Let it get a little sun and then take it back inside, and then do that for about a week, and then the plants should be adjusted. And then with any transplant, you really want to just make sure at no point does that plant dry out. You really want to keep the plant like kind of consistently moist to have your best success.
Okay, I'm gonna end it off there, and at least just make my final announcement. We do have the next event that's coming up is going to be on March 2nd, and it's going to be bringing homesteading into your own home topic, with beekeeping in particular. We want to kind of do the bringing the homestead into your home in a few kind of series. And so we're starting with beekeeping. That'll be on March 2nd. We'll be posting the Eventbrite page for that. So anyone who's interested in beekeeping can go and RSVP already. And yeah, that's basically my final announcement. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. You all are lovely, gave great, amazing advice. And thank you so much for all the wealth of knowledge that you shared.